Hello everyone, welcome to webinar about dual version, our solution to allow smooth and seamless update to the new software versions. Webinar is going to be conducted by myself, Andrei Zelenko, Chief Executive Officer for PortaOne, and Alexander Zalogovsky, Project Manager in PortaOne, and he is a person who firsthand worked on several dual version migrations already. So he has a lot of real field experience about performing those migrations.
Yeah, hi everyone.
So let me do a quick live poll to find out what is the current situation and what are your feelings about new update procedure. So I would like to ask you to submit your votes. The first question is which version of PortaSwitch you are currently running. And the second one is whether sometime recently or in the past you had to execute a long jump. And long jump I call an update which is done across a big release span. This usually happens when customer falls back quite significantly on the maintenance releases, and it's not practical to do migration through a regular step from one long life support release, let's say MR50 to MR55 and then 60. So the gradual update will just take quite a long time. Okay, so I will allow up to 2 minutes to cast your votes, so we'll have reliable results. And in case if somebody is just joining us, I think I saw a few people who just joined, and this is a live poll to measure the current audience. So how are you spread among the newer releases, a bit older releases, and also what is your current experience with software updates? Because as you know, we do have agile development in place. We are trying to make sure we release new software, new functionality, new features which provide new opportunities for you and your team. But we do understand and we know there is an issue that sometimes a customer, they are behind in the software releases, so they cannot have access to functionality which already exists. So we are working for ways to improve this. Okay, so I'm ending the poll now for this topic. And so the results, let me share the results. So what we have, we can see that, okay, the larger portion of the customers of 36%, they have fairly recent releases, so MR70 or later, which is good news. Because I think a few years ago when we did this test, we saw quite a lot of customers falling behind. There are just one participant who is on a really old release, older than MR54, which is also good. And then I see there's a healthy portion on around 1/4 on the releases from MR55 to MR69. And they are probably who are going to reap the most benefits of dual version in the immediate future, but then it's also going to be applicable for other participants. And I see also almost 1/4 is in the new releases in MR80. Perfect. And 1/3 of people who cast their vote, they had to do a long jump at a certain time in the past. And long jump, it's a procedure which sometimes it's necessary to be done, but it's risky. It carries a lot of effort, and we are trying to make sure there are better alternatives to it. Okay, excellent. So let's proceed then. How does the typical experience look for PortaOne customer, or I would say for any person or company who are using any type of software? They learn that a new version is released. They're excited that there is new functionality, new opportunities. They start learning about these features and thinking how they can be applied to their new products or enhanced services. Then they have to prepare the update. And usually during the update, one of the major issues is backward compatibility. So we have to make sure that the existing customers, legacy products, they are not going to be affected. And of course, usually here the issue is there is a variety of scenarios how people can use the software. And sometimes, we know, the end users, they may get upset just because of the change in the user interface or things they're working better, but not the way how people expect. And then the next logical step is to do the actual update, which is done over the weekend, done at night, and that's probably you are feeling anxious at this moment how it will go. And then there's a post-update period when typically some things which you were not able to test here because you didn't anticipate that certain scenario, a certain combination of user equipment, an older firmware on IP phone combined with the version of the media gateway used by carrier, they produce some strange results. And finally, there's a period when everything's fine. You can start using the new functionality. You can gain new customers, grow your business, increase revenue, and that's a period when you would like to spend the most time. But we know the life doesn't end. The pressure on the industry and communication is enormous to deliver new functionality, new features, to change. So we do have to start this process eventually over again. We offer an alternative to this cycle of repeating and feeling tired and anxious a certain of time. So the idea is, instead of doing a big bang when you hit the button and you just go and update the whole system, instead we split. So there are physically two separate systems, one running the older release and one running the newer release. And then we migrate customers gradually. We split them in batches. So we move a pilot customer, observe them, address any issues. If everything's fine, we wait maybe a month until the billing cycle is over, maybe a couple of weeks, and then we resume migration, moving now larger and larger customer volumes. So this way, it's not a revolution, it's evolution. The utility, which does the magic, is called Porter, and it carries the configuration of a single customer with all the stage data, such as customer balance, configuration, CDRs, from one system to another, and it converts the data into a proper format so it could be understood. And when this pilot batch arrives, then we let them work there, and we ensure everything's fine, and we continue with immigration, and you can choose the tempo of immigration. You can start with 10 customers pilot batch, then increase it to 100. When you ramp up the speed, you can move 1,000 customers every night, or you can choose to do them in one large batch of a weekend. You are in full control of how long this period will take and what you do in between. And if there's an issue reported on the new release, and typically it doesn't affect all the customers, it affects only a small subset of customers. So previously you had a tough choice, either you roll back everybody or you make this group suffer until the solution is found. So now it's no longer the case. The affected customers and only the affected customers can be ported back to the older release and wait until the problem is fixed, and then they can be ported again. If we compare the typical update, which you did already probably multiple times with dual version, we will see what the difference is. During the traditional update shown in blue, there is a period when you do the initial verification of or learning of new features and staging system. Then the step number 2 is usually the most laborious and takes the longest time, because this is when your team is responsible for testing all of the different customer scenarios which exist. which could exist, you can anticipate, and then doing the actual update, which doesn't take much in the calendar time, requires some effort, and then dealing with the post-update issues, which happens after that. And one of the challenges here on the step 4, it's unpredictable, and it has a tendency to spike, that customer A and customer B would have some issue and they will be calling you at the same time. So with dual version, the idea is you do the initial deployment, and that's your rollout in your system. And then the tests done by your team, step B, it's a set of basic functionality. So you only cover the common scenarios. You don't have to cover the long tail of all the possible things your customers could do, because this is going to be done by the customers from a pilot batch. So you kind of outsource these final steps of the verification to the pilot set of customers. So as a result, you are able to get to your target. You'll be able to get to the new release sooner in calendar terms, and also using less engineering efforts. So the main benefits for your operations team, for your company, would be, as I said, that only main scenarios need to be tested manually in your laboratory. The other will be done by customers. And there are many, many situations when some scenarios, they just could not be tested in the laboratory because it's a combination of customer equipment, a network, and some other factors which either impossible or too difficult to simulate in your lab. The migration done by a pilot batch of customers. So should there be an oops moment, it only affects a small portion of them. So there is no negative impact on the user experience of the whole customer set. And if there's an issue, only the affected group can be rolled back. You don't have to make tough decision to roll back release for everybody. And dual version, it allows you to do this large, long jump of the big span of maintenance releases, something which some of you did before. However, in this case, it's much safer because you still have this capability of rollback and returning the affected customers back to the old release. So it allows you to cover the gap quickly, but with minimum risks. And another advantage, because we're talking about two separate systems which live their independent lives, that if there's some functionality, maybe 5G or some other feature which your marketing team, your sales team, they're demanding to start selling right now, with the previous update, they have to wait until you do the actual migration. With dual version, they can launch new products, or they can enhance the existing products and start upgrading customers from day one. So while you're still moving all the legacy products. So this is a huge difference in the time to market and ability to seize the opportunity which exists on the market. So what's inside? What is the dual version? As I said, we have two physically separated systems. Your older is a new one. It can be physical hardware in a data center, can be a cloud system, doesn't really matter. There's a porter utility which does migration of customer from one release to another, or a rollback of customer configuration back to the old release. And then there is middleware, dispatching SBC, which provides another fundamental feature of dual version migration. It is transparent to the end user. So the end user, the customer whom we port from one release to another, they don't know, they don't notice. They don't have to reconfigure their phone. They don't have to reconfigure their settings. Everything happens here. The DSBC, it accepts the inbound call requests or calls which arrive from the carriers to the ID numbers registered to your network. Or it could be an API call from a self-care portal. And then it decides whether this customer still lives on the older release or already ported to the new one. And then it just forwards the request and returns back the result. So this migration is transparent to end users. So using it, you will be able to save the required time for the migration, do it with less impact on the user experience. And one of the greatest things about the dual version, because we're doing this through the exposure of a small pilot set, it really helps with testing and addressing functionality of a third-party applications, which cannot properly participate in the initial testing. One of our customers who are doing dual version migration, they discovered after migrating the pilot batch of customers that a portal, which was written by their reseller, stopped working. And apparently the developer who wrote the portal some years ago is not even with the company anymore. So nobody could figure out what's going on. And they didn't do the testing because they couldn't find the developer back then. So, but now they were able to port back these affected customers and let them find new developer, let them figure out what's going on in the code and fix the problem. With a traditional release, it's impossible. And we all know that making multiple third parties, such as resellers or partners, to adhere to your testing schedule is as futile as herding cats. Dual version will allow you to do a large jump of a gap of many releases. And one of the side effects, when we will be doing this, all of the source code modifications which were present on your system, we will incorporate them into the centralized patch management system. Some of them will become obsolete, but the others, if they're still valid, if they're still required, they're going to be maintained and kept as a part of the centralized configuration. So with these large jumps across multiple releases, the savings in the total time and efforts is much larger. Because here, if you were to do it in a safe way, if you were to do with the backward compatibility, you would be going from one LTS, one long time support release, to another. And here they're compressed into a single update. So this is good news for customers who are a bit behind the maintenance releases. This is an opportunity to get current within months time with minimum risks and minimum impact on your customer base. Let's agree on some terminology so it will be even easier for us to discuss the implication and the preferred way of doing the migration. Source, we call the system which runs the older release. Target is the one where we install the new release and where we move customers to. There's a called dictionary data. It is product catalog, so product subscriptions, volume discounts, basically anything which we create before creating a customer, something which is assigned to a customer. When we start the migration, your system is not empty. It already has some legacy products, settings. So customers, so all the things which exist in the system prior to migration, we'll call it inherited data. And it's our joint responsibility to make sure they're preserved and they're properly moved over. And then there's customer data, something which is specific to the settings of individual customer. So customer balance, ID, list of CDRs, voicemails, recordings, everything which goes under that customer. Typical project of migration using dual version starts with the pre-migration analysis. And this is where we actually sit down and we figure out what needs to happen and how it should be done. We use some templates from previous projects. And the goal is to make sure we have correct responsibilities divided between the teams and everybody knows what's supposed to happen. And also we don't miss any important things such as, okay, there's a reseller who wrote their own self-care portal, how that's going to work, who is going to test that, and so on. And I'm going to go through the rest of the steps in the rest presentation. So during the pre-migration analysis, our main concern is to identify integration points. So how does the system connect to the rest of the world? Because it's very seldom that you would have only IP phones connected to PortaSIP. You may have some DID providers. You may have some order entry system or sign up portals. So we list what are the things which we connect to, things which will be passing through the SBC. We also have to make a catalog of the software customizations just to make sure they will be properly moved over to the new release. And we're going to discuss and decide on the date when we will temporarily stop doing changes in the product catalog, such as product pricing. And one of the outputs of the pre-migration analysis is the migration metrics. So basically we list the products you have, and also we identify which components are they using. So how we should split them into batches to make sure, okay, pretty much if we have a combination of checkbox here, we should make sure there's a pilot batch which covers that scenario, covers that functionality that we first test in the pilot set and then start migrating the other customers. And this metrics will define how we'll proceed with the customer batches, how many of them are going to be, and how often we're going to do the migration. And we document all the other details to make sure nothing is missed, and we have a shared knowledge about things which will happen. When you're ready to deploy the target system, you have to make a decision whether it's physical, hardware, or cloud. Our project manager will help you with the proper hardware sizing, network design. Then you're responsible for the actual installation if it's a physical hardware. And in parallel, also our team and your team will be working on, as I said, making a catalog of this source code modifications. And again, this is something which you would have to do anyway for any release, even if you do the old style update. But I'm just putting it here because with dual version, it's also an opportunity to put them into a centralized mode and have them available as a part of a configuration server. One of our customers recently contacted us and they had a new CTO who joined the company. And apparently, nobody in the company at that moment knows what were the modifications which were done over the course of years, because there were some developers who did modifications and quit, and then their CTO is no longer available. So they know there's something on the system, but they don't know exactly what. So keeping it in the configuration server allows to have it exactly stored and available for later use. During the migration, there will be a need for temporary to do a catalog freeze. So you will not be able to change configurations such as pricing of existing products. And we're going to talk more about it later. But there is an opportunity to do a pre-migration changes. So for instance, if you anticipate that your ABC product, the price should be changed from €8 per month to €9 per month, there is an opportunity, a window of opportunity to do it before you start the migration. So you will be able to discuss this date and do it then. When we deploy the target system, then our team does most of the work. On your side, there's going to be only one thing, but maybe tough. It's a negotiation with the sales and marketing team to initiate the product catalog freeze. There will be some minimum amount of downtime involved because we have to reconfigure the database on the source system, because we'll be making a full snapshot of it and copy into the target. And we do have to change some things on the older release, because for those of you who are migrating from release 55 or 60, it was developed 3 years ago. And back then we had no idea about the dual version, and the code there knows nothing. So small changes are required, but we just install additional software components. After that, we are ready to move to the next phase of migration. We have to make the SBC to control, to pass all the calls, all the activities which come from the customers or carriers. Because right now, most of the carriers or customers, they do connect directly to your PortaSIP. So what is going to happen? We have to change it, and the IP address is going to be reallocated to DSBC. The procedure is a bit risky, but there should be no horrible consequences as it happened to Indiana Jones in the movie. We have scripts and we have support team to help you with it. After this step is finished, for your customer perspective, nothing changed. We still send calls, we still send API requests to the same IP address, but now it just all goes to the through DSBC to the source system. And behind the DSBC, we have them in parallel, but customer, they don't really notice it. And after that, the migration of customers starts. So we start with small pilot batch, and during the migration, each customer may experience a short service lockout time because we have to terminate the current sessions, export the customer data, and then move it to the target system. It takes 1 minute or less, and Alexander will show some results, some real benchmarking. It's actually much less than 1 minute. And this time is not cumulative, so it's for individual customers. So if you are moving 1,000 customers, each of them will have a short period of when service is not available. After that, we check the logs to make sure everything went fine from the script perspective, and then your team works with the customer to ensure their functionality and user experience is correct. And then you can proceed with the next batch and next, and you do so until all the customers have been moved over. And when we arrive to this point, the source system is reinstalled and becomes the new target, and the process is repeated in the reverse direction. So the idea is you will have an opportunity to do these migrations and to do them frequently and with minimum impact on the customers. So it's going to be a constant evolution in a way which is not really noticed by your customers or your carriers, and with much less time involvement from the engineering team. And Alexander now will share some specific details about how this migration is done and what is done by each individual participants.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Okay. Just a second, a few small changes. Yeah. Can you still hear me? Everything is okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay. So let's start. Let's start from the tips for the portability managers. So the migration is possible if you are on a MAR55 version. If you are on a lower release, for example, on a MAR50, all you need to do is to initiate a discussion of the next jump with your PortaOne support team, so that you could get all the benefits of our new dual version solution. As for the target release you can jump to, for now it's the latest build of MR70, which was fully tested by our QA team. Obviously, managing two systems by the administrator would require using two tabs in the browser. So one tab for the source system and another tab for the target system. The audit logs, or old name web logs, they are not migrated by default. This is done due to huge size of the data, though this is still configurable on the porter side. Now, for those who are using IVRs, migration of the prepaid calling card IVRs implies that all users of this particular IVR have to be migrated all at once. Now, the last point. Apparently, all the XDRs should be present on the target system before the billing run. Right now, while deciding on the customer batches for the migration, we need to make sure that the customers will be migrated either at the beginning of their billing period or somewhere in the middle. This is to avoid the situation when the customer was migrated. Now we are still migrating his XDRs where the billing period for him already closed on the target system. However, PortaOne feature delay invoicing might be helpful here. Also, we are going to improve this particular item in the upcoming releases. Now let's talk about what you can change during the migration. Obviously, adding new customers accounts is reasonable to do on the target system. However, you are free to change customer account settings on the both systems. For example, you need to change the account ID, or for example, to enable follow me or add an extension. You are free to do that on both systems. You are also free to manage DID and SIM cards inventories. For example, you've bought a pool of new DID numbers and uploaded them to the target system. All those new DID numbers, they will be synchronized between the systems automatically. To save your time, destinations and rates should be also uploaded only on one system. So you can upload them to the source system and they will be automatically synchronized with the target system. Now, you are free to change existing service policies, CPE profiles on either source or target system. What you should avoid doing, creating new service policies on targets on source system or deleting inherited ones, because this may cause issues during the migration. A small hint here: if you anticipate that new service policies might be needed during the migration period, simply create a pool of spare service policies beforehand to be used later. I mean during the migration or during the so-called freeze period. You can change product catalog on the target system without any issues. However, creating new entities or deleting inherited ones on the source system may lead to the billing misconfigurations. For example, customer was billed by one price on the source system. We migrated that customer, then administrator changed the price in the product for that particular customer on the source system. We migrated that customer. And after the migration on the target system, the price is different. It's the old one and not actual any longer. So that's why we strictly do not recommend you creating or deleting such entities on the source system. But again, we are talking about product catalog freeze for the migration period only, so around 3 months. So hopefully it shouldn't be a big deal. Now, important thing about the resellers. Since our approach is to migrate reseller sub-customers exactly in the same way as we're migrating direct customers, this implies that the reseller should be active on both systems. And what does that mean, active on both systems? That means that this reseller will have two separate logins for source system and for the target system. He will have his own balance on each of the systems, like credit limits per system as well. Now, some hints for the technicians. SIP signaling is always passed through the DSBC. So no changes for the end devices. Both IP and domain-based registration is also available, of course. As for the RTP, no changes to what you have right now at all. The only thing to keep in mind, since we will have two systems like target and source, and This implies that there will be a bigger number of the servers. This also implies appearance of new IP addresses. So you might need to ask your customers to adjust their firewalls, and ideally to allocate a pool of your new IP addresses just to avoid extra work. Now, how exactly the SBC understands to which system send the call to? Uh, Either by the SIP username or by the CLD, destination number. If we're talking about, there is also a fallback to the source system if no dispatching data is found. Now, if we are talking about some ambiguous authorization rules, administrators are responsible to keep all new rules synchronized between the systems. Under new rules, I mean those that were created on the source system after we copied the database to the target. Now, uh, some related items related to the Porter items. So Porter migrates all customer-related data, like accounts, settings, XDRs, and so on and so forth. Uh, Porter also migrates all unique IDs, like iCustomer, iAccount, iProduct, iVolume discount plan values. That's basically because we are copying the whole database. This might be helpful in the situation when you have a developer who made an application that retrieves some statistic data from your system for a VIP customer. And there is a hard-coded value of that particular VIP customer, like iCustomer, inside the application. Even in this case, everything will remain working after the migration. Though, however, it would be still reasonable to change this approach and use names, but this might be done after the migration, so somewhere in the future, and this won't be a blocker or an issue for the migration. Multi-threading is available. Our goal is basically to find the optimal migration speed during the first portal launches, and also avoid source system degradation due to the high load generated by Porter. So just like to keep the balance. And also to minimize the service lockout, we're doing two-phase migration. So first phase is a service configuration, and the second phase is XDRs and invoices. Now, if we are talking about migration, batch migration with like 1,000 customers, and 5 of them fail for some reason. First of all, we'll have a detailed login system to identify the reason of the failure. And another point that beside those 5 customers that failed, all the rest of the customers, they will appear on the target system. Migration estimates, they are mainly needed for the PortaOne support team to keep your staff in the loop of like what's going on and when the migration will be finished. And also a rollback, just in case it's needed. Now, case when you have multiple sites. So on this picture, on the source, it implies that the source system and the target system, they are on the geo-redundant side. So basically 2 sites here and 2 sites here. So the SBC should be present on each of the sites, on the main one, on the secondary one. The SBC is needed to dispatch the customer call made through the particular site, either to the source system or to the target system, depends where that customer relies at this very moment. As for the pullback, it's reasonable to use DNS just to avoid playing with IP addresses and avoid issues like, for example, one device knows all the DSBC IPs, but another device knows only the DSBC IP address from the main site. Now, from developer's perspective. So Web Dispatcher, it handles basically both Porta Billing REST and SOAP API and the Porta SIP call control API. So from the application point of view, like everything is pretty much straightforward. We just need to configure the domain name to point to the web dispatcher, and that's basically it, with a few exceptions. If you have an application, let's consider an example. If you have an application, for example, a self-care portal that uses customer or account realm, then no changes at all. For example, I'm accessing customer self-care with user Alex. Customer Alex resides on the target system at the moment, and dispatcher understands this and returns all the required data. So no changes for this application at all. Now about the admin realm. For example, if you want to top up some particular customer, you obviously knows his customer value. And for this case, also no changes to your application at all. No, because obviously the dispatcher understands on which system the customer is located right now. The issue might appear when you need to change the settings, for example, of the particular product. Because we have two systems, the product will be active on both systems, on the source and on the target. And the dispatcher doesn't know on which system you want to change product settings. This is where the context is needed. Because we need to understand on which system you want to change the product. And in this case, dispatcher remembers the context of the previous action. So for example, your previous request was to top up the balance of the particular customer that resides on the source system. So the context will be remembered as the source system, and your next API call will go automatically to the source system. For example, if you want to change the system, if your next call should be against target system, then just call a dedicated set context API method, just to explicitly set to which system you want to work right now. Like I said, for most of your applications, you won't need to introduce any changes, except those cases when you're using direct database access. So in this situation, you should either redesign your application to use API, or as an alternative, to teach your application to work with two databases simultaneously: the database from the source system and database from the target system. Now let's touch the performance-related point. On this slide, you may see current testing results. Our QA team conducted tests on real databases taken from our customers from the USA, after their approval, of course. And according to the latest tests, we're talking about seconds to move a single customer without XDRs. Obviously, it depends on the size of the customer. For example, number of assigned accounts, like 10, 100, or like thousands. So basically, current performance figures shows around 3 seconds per average customer without XDRs on the MySQL-based system. As for the case study, here is a real story I've been personally involved in as a project manager. One of the communication service providers specializes in providing faxes over the internet using T38 fax over IP. This provider allows customers to bring their own voice over IP devices. And at the last count, there were more than 300 different equipment models connected to their Porta switch. So you'd imagine how much time it took them to do the tests. So gradual migration meant that they only had to deal with a small number of issues in a given time. So these issues were detected and fixed quickly. Another curious moment, if you remember our recent discussion about RTP traffic, in this particular case, it took a lot of time for the provider to convince a few their end customers to jump the firewalls. So that's about it from my end. Andrew, please continue.
Okay, and while Alexander will be passing the screen share back to me, let me actually launch another quick poll. So we'd like to ask you, what is your typical experience with the update? How long does it take to prepare and execute an update? And let's count the time from the day you start planning the update until the date you officially over and you start thinking about the next update. Right? So let's count in that relaxation or customer growth period. And the second question today, okay, with the current setup, is it something you wish to change or you would like to keep it as is? Okay, and I'll allow 1.5 minutes. And while we're waiting, actually, one of the frequent questions which also comes up during our initial discussions with the customer, it's, of course, all the specific, how long the process, the migration will take, what is going to be the impact, how many customers we can move per night. And I will be happy to share some benchmarking results and results from past projects we did. But as we say, your mileage may vary, and this is why we conduct the pre-migration analysis. So for your migration, first, our team will work with you and produce answer to those results about what makes sense, how many customers you have, which strategy is the best, and only then you will be able to make an educated decision whether to proceed or not with the dual version data. Okay, so, okay, I don't see people, so only 47% of people, okay, 50%. Well, let's wait a few more seconds. Okay, so I'm going to share the results. Okay, so we have, so we can see about the time it takes to execute update. We have a very nice, almost even spread. We have some customers who can do it in less than 3 months, but then roughly the same amount of customers are doing it in longer period. And then also we have some customers who are not sure, maybe it's not applicable to them. So it does take quite some time. And there's overwhelming yes about the need for a change. And this is a bit anticipated because we've heard your request, we've heard your ideas and your desire for a better and smoother update experience. And this is why we've been investing so much engineering resources in the past 3 years into creating a dual version system. Okay, so now let's move on to the next part. Let's go to our live Q&A session. So a reminder, you can type your questions in the Q&A window. And while you're doing this, I will also answer a few of the very typically asked questions. So there is a called zero downtime update functionality and dual version port switch. So the question, what was the difference? And obviously one, it allows you to do a quick jump to the next release without impact on the customer base, without the downtime visible to the customer base. But then you are still exposed to all the potential UX issues because now overnight, all of your customers, they are using a newer release. And if something not according to their liking, they're not going to be happy about this. The dual version itself, it does not involve the redundancy as a part of the design. So dual version is just the idea of you will have one system and another system in parallel. It is a good idea, obviously, to make each of the systems, the source and target, to make them redundant, because probably it's the worst thing you want to happen. You're executing a long migration, you are already halfway through, and few more months remaining, and it seems to be doing great, and the customers are not really noticing anything, and everything is perfect, and then there's a data center outage, right? So either your source system or target system is down, and then it is going to be visible. So the dual version does not replace, it rather works in conjunction with the current functionality of multiple sites available in PortaSwitch. Is it required to deploy additional DSBC if you already have PortaSIP and PortaSIP cluster? Yes, it is, because PortaSIP, it is a part of your existing system, source system, I presume. So we need to have something in front of it, something which will make a decision whether this should be routed to source system, PortaSIP cluster and source system, or to the target. And the question, how long the update will take? Well, there's no specific time constraints from the architecture perspective. You are free to decide how long you're going to do. Obviously, the longer you do, the more gradual you do the testing, the longer you can wait until the pilot batch of customers is completely happy. The only downside to it is there's a product catalog freeze, so probably your salespeople, marketing people may be a bit complaining about changing the existing product. But again, this only applies to the legacy products which were already in place before migration. Nothing prevents you from launching a new updated product and migrating the customers there. From the general perspective, I would say the safe and reasonable amount of time would be around 6 months. This is if you do properly, if you wait maybe at least a month for the first pilot sets of customers, if you do proper execution, also without overwhelming or stretching thin your engineering resources. It can be done shorter. It can be done shorter, or it can be extended. And it's also going to depend on how many different products, lines of business, and customers you have. And so now let me take a look at the questions which were received from our customers. The question whether it's possible to do a multi-stage update, move a pilot group of customers to the new release, and then perform a mass migration of all remaining customers at once. Nothing prevents you from doing so. The limitation would be, of course, the speed, how Porter can move the customers, but if you have a few thousand of them, or even like 10, 20,000, as Alexander showed the results, it's pretty fast, it can be done, but then you lose all the advantage of dealing with customer issues gradually. Because if you do it during the weekend, then on Monday, you move 5,000 customers, very likely that some of them is going to have issues, but you will have hundreds of customers calling on Monday. So it is possible, but it kind of like diminishes the benefits of the technology. Will the web dispatcher is able to interpret API calls, and where it's possible to send API calls required by the release, and the API will translate there. It does not translate the API request as such, but it forwards them to either the source or the target system. So the idea is the newer releases, the old code, which already worked with the old version, will work seamlessly because the request will be sent to a new version and should be returned back, unless there's some backward compatibility issue, but there's just a few of them. And the new code, it's then just going to be, presumably it has to work with the new version because then maybe it's not enough data to work for it from the previous one. And we're actually going to publish a separate chapter in our API guide specifically for developers, how they can port their existing applications to work with dual version, and how they can write new applications in such a way that the application is going to work fine, even if operator executes dual version migration later on. will all the new, which maintenance releases be available as migration targets, and what's the likely delay between initial release and becoming the valid target? Obviously, we need to test. In order to propose you a migration from one release to another, we have to test it in our lab. We have to make sure the data transformation works fine, all the things work correctly. So this, as Alexander said, there's going to be a matrix of already supported releases. And the idea, of course, is if we produce a maintenance release 90, right, to make the dual version update for it available within a matter of months after the release is out. So because the release is out, you're interested in update to it, so we'd like to make it as soon as possible. Right now, our compatibility metrics is a bit scarce because a lot of engineering resources went into the actual development and testing the functionality. But as we catch up on the functionality in dual version, we will have more resources to make more of these migration paths available. Other cost implications migrated to using the dual version. Well, the extra system, it does require licensing. And the license for this additional system can be either purchased as we provided on the perpetual license model, and then it's your site, which you can use as a target system within dual version. You can use it as a totally separate system. You can use it as an additional site. It's up to you how to use the licenses. And if you are interested just extending the system for dual version, then we can come up with some special licenses to cover that situation. And then the best way to discuss it, talk to our sales manager and our customer support managers. Okay, and I don't see any more questions. There was a question about how long migration is going to take. And the answer is it depends on the number of products you have, on the number of integration points you have. The rule of thumb is, I would say, between 3 to 6 months if it's done on the small amount of products and customers. But the proper answer, the better estimate, will be produced after the pre-migration analysis.
Andrew, I'm not sure how much time do we have, but there are a few questions in the chat section.
Okay. Yes, please. Okay, let me see what's there. Okay. So the question is if whether extra servers are required, and yes, so it is a physically separated system, because the only way for us to allow your current system run uninterrupted and your existing customers to live there is to have a physically separated set of hardware in the data center. Or, as I said, you can also use our cloud system for this, and it can be used as a temporary migration measure, or potentially, if you like the cloud, and I think the cloud is way of going forward in a few years, you can use this as an opportunity to actually move your operations from the physical data center into the cloud. Okay, and I did answer a question about the license, but it does require licensing. Okay. And the question about the who is responsible for configuration synchronization between the two independent systems. Well, first of all, and that's the, if some of you spoke to us about a year ago and evaluated dual version then, our first approach, our dual version 1, was with the assumption that we produce an empty target system and you have a freedom to design the products the way you want. And the idea was you can probably, sometimes you have some legacy, you have some inefficient configuration, you can do it in a better way. But as we find out, it does require quite a lot of manual work for just replicating the product. So we abandoned this idea, and dual version release 2, version 2, which is available now, we take a full snapshot of all the products of the whole database, and it just moved over. So all of the products you have, they are tariffs, invoice templates, it's going to appear there. It's already there. So the only thing you will be doing, it's making changes. And as I said, you should not be making changes in the pricing during the product catalog freeze. So the changes which typically made, they are going to be new products and new product configuration made in the target system. And only in case if there's an existing customer and something changed on their network, their carrier used some new equipment and you need a service policy, then the service policy should be adjusted on both systems. So that part goes to the administrator, but we are thinking about a way to allow more objects to be auto-synchronized the same way as we do synchronization between tariffs and rates. A question about the DSBC and the IP address change. If it's always has to be applicable. As I said, yes, we always need to have a DSBC. So even if you have a fairly new Porta SIP, still, this is going to be Porta SIP, which only knows about your existing system, only knows about your customer. So if you were to move from release 85 to release 90, we still need to put DSBC in front of it. And the question about how many servers actually required for a target system. Well, as many as is sufficient to handle the load, the amount of customers you have. And that's probably going to be a topic for pre-migration analysis to check what is going on your system. And but once again, I would like to draw your attention that the cloud option is available. And it may be a better option, especially if you're not considering, if you consider dual version, maybe just to do the migration now to get to the recent release, and then you're not sure if you're going to use it full time. And again, cloud, it's a great opportunity for you to use this hardware to rent it only while the migration is going on and while you need to do this. And Alex, thanks for noticing these questions in the chat. I would have missed them. Okay. So this is it. Thank you very much for your attention. We will send you a follow-up brief survey, also ask about your plans and your vision and your situation, like how do you feel some restrictions are going to work out for you. For instance, what's the maximum duration of the product catalog freeze period? So please reply, it will help us a lot to improve dual version product in the direction you need, in the direction you want. And then I hope to talk to you soon regarding your specific dual version implementations and getting you to the latest releases with all the great things we've been developing and allowing you to run a better business. Thank you, Alex, for your help.